Do it.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Nina Tucker. I'm president of the North Essex Chamber and owner of Noesis Marketing. Today, we are going to have a presentation on, let's make sure I get this right, planning for aging in today's world. And I think we'll just get started. We have 3 speakers today. And I'm going to let our moderator introduce them. Our moderator today is Andrew Donofrio. Andrew is a consultant and professional development coach and is well-versed in the topic that we are discussing today. So Andrew, or Drew, I guess everyone calls you Drew. The floor is yours.
Listen, I've been called a lot worse in my life, so it's really not a problem. Actually, what I'll do is, although I know everybody on this, I'll let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with ladies first. Erika, why don't you introduce yourself quickly?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. For those who do not know me, I'm Erika with Seniors in Place. So I've been with Seniors in Place for the last 2 years. Seniors in Place has been in business since 2001. So again, it's owned by the Blecker family. Chad will do his intro in a few minutes. He's no longer with us, but we're obviously working very closely with him at New Jersey Home Modifications now. So we do provide certified health aides in Union, Essex, Morris, Bergen, and Passaic counties. We are accredited with distinction. So that does put us at the top 1% in New Jersey. And all of our certified health aides are safely being tested in our Springfield office every week. And they're all our employees, of course, insured and bonded through us. And I'll tell a little bit more about the story, how I came here. But right now, let's introduce Chad and Chuck, and then we'll continue our conversation. So thank you for joining us.
So now that we got the ladies first out of the way, we'll go on better looking. Chuck, you want to take it?
Oh my goodness. Thank you guys. Chuck Rose. I'm a certified financial planner with Clarus Group. We are a small independent registered investment advisor. And I love using the word independent because that means our clients come first. Without our clients, just like the rest of the speakers today, we don't really have a career or have anything. So we try to solve problems for a lot of people. And personally, I just love talking about living long. It's one of my goals, but living well. And I think that's what attracted me to people like Chad and Erika and, organizations like Seniors in Place. And I just met Drew, solving problems, living long, living well, and obviously their personalities, which will come out today too. We just have a good energy together. And, that's what we really strive for long term. So hopefully it spurs some questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chuck. And last but certainly not least, Chad Blecker.
Right on, right on. Hey, everybody. Alrighty, so I'm Chad, and I'm from New Jersey Home Modification Services. But a lot of you know me as the owner of Seniors in Place, which isn't the case any longer. About 6 months ago, I sold my interest in the family company back to the family. And I opened up New Jersey Home Modification Services. What I'm doing is I'm helping our seniors and our special needs community create sustainability at their homes. I modify their homes to make them make sense for them. So I do all the neat like specialty equipment installations like stair lifts and ceiling lifts and ramps and all that good stuff. The other thing that I do that's really nice is I can completely remodel their bathrooms, their bedrooms, their kitchens, anything that they need to have altered to create some sustainability in their home and to make it safer and make it so that people can live on their terms. It's funny because over the last 20 years, that seems to be my motif. Before it was with care, and now it's with modifications. So that's who I am in a nutshell.
Thanks, buddy. We're going to handle this kind of like a panel discussion, and I'm going to kind of tip off the topic today. I mean, what we're talking about, obviously, is planning for aging, older adults in today's world. It's an issue, I think, that everybody has either faced, will face, or is a little bit nervous and concerned about facing, right? I know from my perspective, just personally, my parents are in their mid to late 70s. Dad's had some problems, but they're getting along just fine now, but I do worry about it. Particularly, I do a lot of work with Seniors in Place, and so I hear it on a daily basis, and it's a real thing. And I thought that what was interesting is The Census Bureau actually put something out recently and said that our aging population, so from 65 years old and older, will increase from its current level at 15% to 21% in 2030. So, less than 10 years, you're going to have that kind of jump. And they're talking about, the 85 plus population tripling in that time. So obviously now we're faced with, okay, God willing, everybody ages gracefully and everybody's healthy. I personally love the notion, 98, swing a golf club, and that's it. I'll take that. I'll sign that up. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily the reality. And so sometimes, we're faced with decisions. Do we keep somebody at home? How do we do that? Do we put them in a facility? So Erika, I'm going to go to you first, and maybe start off just by telling us what's the differentiator, right? How do you decide? Because sometimes, in facility care is appropriate, and sometimes in-home care is appropriate.
Absolutely, Drew. That's an amazing question. So many times I'm having conversations with families that are really completely confused, and that's why they come to us to really figure that out. What we would normally do, of course, is have a very in-depth conversation with them through an intake process. We'd really understand mom or dad's, the loved one's needs. So sometimes, most of the times we find we can care for the loved one at home. But if it's really something where dementia has really set in terribly, there's different types of dementia. There is one specifically that I remember I had a client with. It's called Lewy body syndrome, and it's really very difficult. And it's something where the caregiver, at times when it's very severe like this, it just doesn't really work out at home. And that's when we will, of course, refer our personal relationships to the nursing home that is the best fit for that client. So we totally have that resource to our wheelhouse, if you will. So we really can guide the family, in the most, directive way for them. And sometimes it may involve a conversation with our nursing team or even our social worker. So at Seniors in Place, we have many different resources to fall back on. So we really can provide the best care for that individual.
That's great. And so, it sounds like, the deciding factor oftentimes is the level of care. If it's an overwhelming care need, it might have to go to the facility.
Exactly.
Do you find, Erika, that most people prefer to kind of keep their parents in the house when it's manageable?
I absolutely do, especially obviously after the pandemic. We're seeing a lot more where, the loved ones really want to stay home. They're afraid to go back into a nursing home. So we really are seeing a lot of that. And that's where Chad comes in as well, because so many families we're seeing need different space now to provide A, working from home remotely, B, now having a loved one live with them. So this is really where Chad services and our service are marrying together to really keep that loved one with the family safely at home during this pandemic. It's been really crucial.
Gotcha. Chad, talk to me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about, I know from my perspective, where my parents are, for instance, they're on a second level, right? Are most homes fit and ready? How do you approach the home and take a look at it? And I'm going to give you a little hint right now. You're on mute, just to let you know. So I don't want you to start the whole thing. We all start screaming at you. You're on mute. Yeah, just take us through that a little bit. What do you look at from the home perspective?
So what we're doing we start out with an assessment, right? So it's really interesting. Every home, the homes are all together different. Every house is different. And what's really neat is every person's different, and everybody's conditions and where they are in life, in time and space is different. So I start with the patient themselves, or the client, or your loved one, your mom, your dad. I start with mom, and we talk to her and we figure out where her trouble spots are, what's ailing her. Does she have ambulation problems? Can she not handle stairs? Does she have trouble getting out of bed? Can she stand up from from the toilet? There's so many different little things that you want to look at the entire house, but you want to look at it through the lens of what the people are currently dealing with. Now, in this conversation, having everybody on right now, I wanted to also highlight one other thing. It's great to talk about putting grab bars in and putting in stair lifts and doing all those things. And that's stuff that we can do for your loved ones now. You know, the people who have an acute issue, or you see people starting to get your parents start weakening, you know, and there's a lot of things that we can do. If we have a stairwell in place, everyone thinks about a stair lift as the first option, and a stair lift is great. But guess what? You have seniors who don't want to have a stair lift in their home. You know, we have family members who don't want stair lifts in their home. And this senior, this individual, your mom, may be able to climb up the stairs with a second banister. So there's so many different options. And that's why we evaluate the home based on what people are dealing with. Now, one thing I do want to just highlight, I do a lot of bathroom remodels, and people in our age bracket, it's funny because you think, oh, well, what am I going to learn on this right now? If you're in your home and you're in your like forever home and you're doing any work, if you're doing your bathrooms, anything like that, there is no sweat for your contractor to throw some blocking in the wall at 33 inches so that later on, if you need a grab bar, you can just screw it right in. So there's little tricks like that that we can talk about as well. I just wanted to throw that in while I was thinking of it, Drew.
Yeah, no, it's an important component, Chad, because one of the things that I've always found that was kind of unique when I deal with Erika, and of course, when we worked together when you were at Seniors in Place, and now having the relationship we have now, is you guys are a bit of a fortune teller. Like you've seen so much on the client side that you almost know what's coming for a lot of the clients. Is that an accurate assessment, Erika, that you sort of have some insight into, hey, this is how the evolution, or if you will,
Absolutely.
the decline will be?
Yes, absolutely, Drew. We see, you know, when clients are coming home from rehab or a hospital, we're really assessing them, as Chad is, of course, seeing what their capabilities are. And then a lot of the times with our loving caregivers, that client is actually getting stronger now, coming home from rehab, and they're doing fantastic. And then we may start off with a live-in aid, and then that client is doing better, and we go down to hourly. So we really can see how that process is probably going to play out, as you just mentioned. So yes, we definitely do see that.
Got it. Yeah. And Chad, that's one of the things that you've always said, I've always heard you say, is like, not so much where you're at now, where you're gonna be. And that's, I think that's critical.
So to that point, Drew, here, I'll spend a minute on that. You have the reason why it's really important to assess is because everyone has different situations, and how we actually provide services really matters as to what kind of payer sources you have and things like that. You know, so for instance, I'll give you a quick case study, quick story. I have a gentleman with Parkinson's, and when I evaluated his home, he had said to me, Chad, I'm trying to stay as independent as I can. I don't really want a stair lift. He goes, I struggle up the stairs. So I went and I evaluated his home, and we were talking about putting a handrail in, but he had long-term care insurance. So this is a great opportunity to talk about this. So him having long-term care insurance, you know, I had the nurse come from the long-term care insurance to evaluate him. And then they said, you know what, you absolutely are approved for a stair lift and for different bathroom modifications. And so he had a payer source. So for him, where he had me come in to do an extra grab bar, when he found out that he had his long-term care insurance that would fund his modifications, and they'd only do it once, so we had to make that decision, he opted for the stair lift. And thank God he did, because a month later, he actually needed it. He couldn't pull himself up the stairs any longer.
Wow.
But now, if this was a different scenario, right, and he didn't have long-term care, so for him, he's watching his money, he's just making sure everything's smart, we would have put that second handrail in. And then when time told the story and he actually needed the lift, then you do that at that point. But at least he'd be educated and know what's coming.
Gotcha. Speaking of knowing what's coming, I mean, you know, when we talk about this, we have to look at the financial component. I mean, it has to get paid for, right? And I'll tell you, you know, from a financial planning perspective, Chuck, I wish you had a crystal ball. I wish every financial planner did. We'd all be much better off. But you certainly do know about the planning side of this, and what steps you should probably take earlier on rather than to get caught off guard. So what can people do to maximize the potential, their financial position, to be able to afford this type of stuff?
Thanks, Drew. And yeah, I mean, what everyone had said so far really puts the family at the center of it, right? And I think it's worth mentioning again, you know, turn out the news, turn off the old wives' myths of, you know, hey, we've got to pick up and move to a ranch or move to Arizona. That's cool, but what if you're by your support system? There's a lot of options that are open to you, you know. And when you're thinking about this, think about your family. You know, as Americans, I was thinking, like, we have a really big do-it-yourself mentality. So there's a couple traps, right? There's one trap of, are you thinking long-term enough? Are you missing something? And that's where it's worth having that conversation with families, professionals that you trust. Am I thinking long enough? Am I thinking about the what ifs? And how can I make a decision today that'll help my family? If you're the decision maker, whoever it might be mom, it might be dad, it might be whoever, it might be, one of the, as an adult child, it might be you're the decision maker. But what happens if you're incapacitated? And it may not just be lifelong, it could be dementia we mentioned before. It could just be, you have to go get a procedure. What if mom needs help while you're in the hospital getting a procedure done? So by having these things thought of ahead of time, about, what does your future look like? Where do you want to spend those golden years? Am I estimating here's an industry term for you, longevity risk? Because we all would love to live long, right? But there's a risk to longevity relative to your savings. How am I going to pay for what I need later on? Does my family know what I want? And, we've all heard plan for the worst and hope for the best. I think if we can think about planning for the worst and living for the best, that's a really good way to think about it. So I have a little bit of an action plan, but I'll stop there, so we can continue this conversation before we do some more action items at the end.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, that part is critical. I know from my perspective, it's something that's come into my purview in the last few years. I wonder, only from the perspective of my involvement in this industry over the past couple of years as a consultant in this industry, I wonder how my parents are going to deal with it, right? I wonder at the notion of, even something so simple of, dad, mom, we're going to bring somebody in 8 hours a day to assist with certain things. Erika, do you find that conversation challenging with children of families, and how do you overcome that? What are some of the questions you get?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's every day I have this struggle with the loved ones are calling for their parents and they tell me right off the bat, mom and dad have been independent all of their lives and now they don't want somebody helping them. They want their independence. So I think the best way that we really work around that is we really build the trust with the family. First of all, we really learn about, the client's needs, of course, and what they used to do if they have dementia in the past, but if they're of sound mind, what do they still enjoy doing? So we really express to them that the caregivers are there to become more of their friend and almost like a family member to really help them just get through the activities that they're having a little trouble with. And I always emphasize to just say to the loved ones that it's just temporary. It's just every day is a new day. So we'll see how things go. And with that, they feel the pressure is really taken off of that. Oh my gosh, I'm totally now dependent. They know it's temporary. They see how it goes. And our caregivers, we have to be so grateful for them. They're so loving and they're so attentive and they are just so willing to really make a difference in our seniors' lives that they see this and then they become really good friends. So in the beginning, it's really tough getting over that hurdle, but in the end, it's amazing.
Great. And I've often heard on some of these, when we talk at the end of the day, Erika, about some of the cases that come in and some of the clients that are serviced by Seniors in Place. From my perspective, there's a huge synergy between sort of what Seniors in Place does and what New Jersey Home Modifications does. Chad, from your perspective, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, you can't modify a home necessarily to the degree, that a home health aid might not be necessary and vice versa. A home health aid can't necessarily come in and solve all the needs, right? I know that sometimes It's hard to marry an aid up with a client because there's lifting issues, there's bathing issues. So how do you step in to sort of assist, that aid, if you will, in a sense, to service the client better? What can be done in the home for that?
Oh, there's tons of stuff. And it really depends on what the issue is that the client's dealing with. People, caregivers, I was in home care for the better part of 16 years. And what we found is that when caregivers were trying to lift people, they get hurt. So there's tons and tons of apparatus. I mean, there's so many different, they call them sit to stands. There's recliners that'll actually stand people all the way up. And, if someone can't stand up and that's the problem, you know, you have to evaluate where they are. So for instance, you talk to people about sitting down on a toilet, and you know what? They're okay. They can get down to that, like that last little bit, that last 3 inches, but that last 3 inches, they plop right down, you know, and then standing up from there, they're stuck. You know, so it comes down to evaluating what people are dealing with and then trying to find the best solutions for them. And that can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. I think the big thing to realize though, is that our seniors are they're us. They're just older. You know what I mean? And I think that most people, when we talk about seniors, we decouple ourselves from that. But if I talk to my dad, you know, my dad's a 76-year-old man, you know, we talk to my dad and he's just like me, and he's all, you know, ready to go. He wants to, you know, talk about all the real things that are going on in the world, but he can't walk, you know? And so he does have those pieces that are limiting, but he's not stopping himself. So I think part of it is also empowering the senior, empowering the people to make their own choices. And when you bring them into the fold and you bring them into the conversation, it is amazing how much more receptive they get and how much easier the process goes with the family. It's kind of funny. Over the years, I've walked into the room and heard the kids having the conversations with their parents, and everyone's at each other. There's a lot of volatility. And I walk into the room and I start to talk with mom and dad, and they're answering me like, oh, Chad, this is this and this is that, and everything's wonderful. And the kids get livid. They get angry because they're like, I asked you the same question and you won't even answer me. And what is he? Why is he? It's because when you bring a professional into the world, I don't care if you're a nurse, a doctor, and you're dealing directly with your specific practice, it's still mom and dad, and you're still their little boy or little girl. You know, so that dynamic matters a tremendous amount. Sometimes I'm called in just to have conversations with people.
Yeah, you know, you bring up an interesting point. You know, it's the mindset of the aging individual as well that I think has been a real shift. I laughed that, you know, we were in a meeting for Seniors in Place not too long ago, and Erika will remember this. We had some LinkedIn training come in, and at the conclusion of the training, guess who asked for the PowerPoint slides? Your father. And I thought to myself, you know, what is he going to improve his LinkedIn profile now? The man's 76, but that's his mindset. And, you know, and I think that part of it is, you know, that mindset. Chuck, from your perspective, you mentioned an action list. You know, we're talking about two demographics in a sense, right? So Erika talked about dealing with the children, and Chad talked about dealing with the parents. Is your approach different? How do you advise the children? How do you advise the parents? How does that work?
It's a really great question, and it's really hard. You know, a lot of our clients still have parents, right? Or some of our clients have grandparents and their parents have passed. And that's a really tough situation. And those folks that are making decisions for the generations above them want to do so much, right? But it really is it's a very different approach. I find that they're two separate conversations because as we all age, we ask these questions and they're worth asking. But there are certain insurances you can get in your 50s and your 60s that you can't get in your 70s or 80s or even later, like the long-term cares or some of the life insurance with the options. So funding is a different approach. Personality issues aside, right? We've all got wants and needs, and that's really where it should start. That's the best place to start. But recognizing like what are the options available to you? What do you have? Who do you have around you? You know, one of the things is really having these discussions is more value than, you know, than anything. Just getting started. Who are the people around you? Is it parents, grandparents, and then the professional team around you? Do you have a financial planner? And I'm recognizing people on this call and in the chamber, right? Professional accountants, medical helpers, estate planners, right? Who's around you from an inventory standpoint of who and what are the things what are the assets and liquidity that you have? And it becomes this giant list of stuff. Well, yeah, you have a list. How can you put it together? And working with a Chad or you or Erika or a financial planner like ourselves or tax folks. Well, okay, now that you've got this, what is the easiest way to access if you needed to make a change to your home or make a move or get some help? And these are the things that are worth doing while you still have energy, right? While you're young and looking forward. So maybe a long answer to your question, but you know, that approach of take an inventory of where you are, where you want to be, and how you can get help. And by talking to folks can open up some doors like, oh, I didn't realize I could use my insurance policy for this. Or I didn't realize, hey, we have a retirement plan. It can be used in a different way. So we're looking for help. And even as professionals, by empowering the professionals around you to talk to each other, right? And if we're talking to clients, hey, can I call your accountant? Can we put that in writing? Can I have an open line to your accountant? Can I have an open line to your estate planner? You know, we're not going to do things behind your back, but we're going to raise questions and just make sure, hey, we're working on this. Does it raise any red flags for you? Or could we do it better? It really compounds the positive outcomes for your family in a huge way.
You know, looking around the room, Chuck, I'm curious about this question. When I look around the room, I think everybody here is, you know, the Gilligan's Island and Brady Bunch generation, right? You know, we all remember those shows. So that sort of begs the question. And if I take my parents out of the picture for a second, Chuck, from my perspective, 53 years old, when do I start thinking about it? Should I start thinking about my care now, or when do I start giving it that consideration?
It's a really great question because in your mid 50s, you may or may not have, and every family's different. Your dependents are probably starting to be grown and on their own. So the conversation is on, well, how about yourself? You have no longer have dependents, which, you know, and a lot of people may have a spouse or not, depends on their personal situation. Now, what do you do? Your whole life was around possibly raising kids or building a career and building. And now that you've built, what is the attention towards? If you've had some forms of insurance, are they worth taking a look at to make sure you have long-term care going forward? The price of long-term care insurance or life insurance that has long-term care as an option, it compounds at a huge rate as you get a quote in your 50s compared to your 60s or your 70s. So there are insurances that, or vehicles, I should say, even that have multiple purposes. It could be for life insurance and it could be for medical care. One of the things I learned, because I'm an outsider, right? But if you've gone through some stuff with some family, you start to hear the term activities of daily living. And you, as an insider, you may take that term for granted, but it's pretty standardized. And you guys could probably talk to that. Certain insurances or certain tax things, tax potentially like tax write-offs are based on, do you need help with your activities of daily living? And that's really the common language that'll string between your medical professionals, your insurance, your tax folks to get things figured out, and your financial professionals of what you need help with and how we can deliver that. So it totally is worth, we'd say probably late 40s to early to mid 50s. It's totally worth the conversation of, hey, I've got this far. What do I do with my next 50 years? Because a lot of times that's what you're looking at when you're 50, potentially.
Yeah. Let me just clarify, early 50s, not mid 50s, Chuck. I just want to be clear about that. But nevertheless, and so you do bring up a good point. And Erika, I'd like for you to just speak briefly to this if you can. Tell us about ADLs, assisted daily living, and how the aids help with that.
Sure, absolutely. So most of the times when we're speaking to a client themselves or their loved one, simple questions, right? We're asking, are they able to get a shower? A lot of times our seniors are now afraid to shower. They're afraid because they're afraid of falling in the shower. So certainly that's a daily activity that we'd like them to continue. Hygiene is super important still. So our aides would definitely be able to help them shower, get themselves dressed, remind them to take their medicine. It's so important. So many of our loved ones aren't taking the medicines and then are ending back in the hospital. And it's just, something that is sometimes overlooked by the family members, which is really important. The other things, of course, would be just nutrition, preparing meals, cleaning the house, light housekeeping, taking them to doctor's appointments. These are all the things that our aides are, proficient at, and also really enjoying the rest of their day. Like I mentioned earlier, honing in on a hobby or an interest that senior hasn't maybe engaged in a while because they've been home alone. I mean, during the pandemic, it's been horrible. All of our seniors have been isolated, even in nursing homes and assisted livings, of course. Now that, things are opening up, thank goodness, they are getting more activities. But our aides would be, engaging with cards and puzzles and just trying to stimulate them, doing light exercises, going outside for a walk to get fresh air. So these are the activities that really make the day go a lot happier for our seniors. And that's the goal for our caregivers, to really bring this, happier, loving day to the senior.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Chad, I have a quick question for you. especially two-part, is any home really capable of making modifications? Are you able to kind of modify almost any home? And how does a townhouse condo factor into this?
Okay. Most homes can be modified. There are some funky homes. There's some places, there's some brownstones in Hoboken. There's some really narrow stairwells that just won't accept a lift, and people can't deal with the stairs. And in those situations, you have to look at different options. Maybe it's a pass-through elevator or something like that. I mean, truly, not all homes can be completely modified. That's just the reality of what we live in. We can usually do, usually. That was the first part of the question. What was the second part, Drew?
Townhouse, condo.
So interestingly enough, yes, townhouses and condos, a lot of the time, especially now, townhouses are grandiose. Some townhouses are larger than homes, freestanding homes. And you have these tremendous stairwells. What comes in there is who the owner is. If they're renting or leasing, whether you can do modifications, it really comes down to the homeowner's purview. And if it's a situation where they don't own and they're renting, then we have to get certain permissions. As long as there's the right permissions in place, we can do some modifications. They do some of the homeowners associations or the leasing companies may give people a little bit of flack about putting things in, as long as they have mentioned if there's a plan to take it out, they're okay with it. So there's a couple little caveats there, but really it just comes down to communicating with people. If it's a homeowner and it's a townhouse, sky's the limit. I can usually fix it real well. The big thing I see in townhomes is like everyone thought it would be cool to have a recessed living room. So everyone drops down one step into a living room, and they don't realize that one step is an 8-foot ramp for a senior or for a person with special needs. It's interesting.
Got it. And Erika, just one final thing for you on the payment side. We talked, I know this is a thing, and I don't want it to be missed here.
Right.
Chuck mentioned a lot about the insurance policy world, and he talked about sort of that add-on for life insurance for the long-term care. But sometimes they don't have that, but there's still other options for insurance, right?
Yes, the insurance that Seniors in Place will accept is long-term care policy, of course. So as long as the elderly client has purchased a policy years past, our compliance manager will reach out to that insurance company, provide all the paid invoices to us, along with the timesheets for the caregiver. So we'll handle all of that for the client so they don't have to get all frazzled with sending in paperwork to the insurance company. But when we find a client that has a long-term care insurance policy, it's a much better fit because they're getting reimbursement for this care that their parents or they themselves need. And also if they have a life insurance plan that they could possibly cash in, I believe, right, Chuck? Am I saying it right? They can use that. So that's what we accept.
Yeah, it's to know that it would be worth, or anytime, along the line, to get a review of what you own and what are the possibilities, and is it convertible? Sometimes
Right.
these policies can be convertible from one to the other. And, Drew mentioned that before, at what age does it make sense? Well, I'm in my mid 40s. So I have friends that have kids that are already in college, and I have, friends with newborns at my age. So it's a life stage more than an age. And, and this is where the open conversation can really help. Like, where do we need to be? And I think this is where the education is always the first level, right? The awareness, the education, and knowing your options. Because, if in a perfect world, if funds were limitless, you'd have all these options at your fingertips, but they're not. So you've got to go your own road. And at the end of the day, if you can steer your own ship and you've had all the options available to you early, at least to understand, that's to me, that's the best part of it, for you to at least understand. And for us as professionals to help you drive down that road that you want to be on.
Fantastic. All right, before I open it up for any questions, I'll just hit my 3 panelists. Did we miss anything?
I think that we spoke a lot about long-term care insurance, and I think that if you want to fly it all under a neat flag, the thing that you don't want to have happen is you don't want to be, you personally, people, us, we don't want to be in a scenario where we know and we've seen, we understand, we've been educated, and so we know there's products out there, and then we get to that point in our life, where we need it and we ignored it. So I think it's important to take our own personal inventory as well. For instance, I have bad legs, my right knee, I need a new right knee desperately. For me, I'm actually thinking about, hey, is this the house I want to stay in? Just little silly things with planning will actually make your life, it'll give you a better quality of life as you go forward, and whether that's working with Chuck or, understanding the different options through me or Erika, it's important to have good planning, involved. I think that's the best thing that you can come away with this with is some resources and a good plan.
Understood. All right. Any questions from our group? Nina, I'm not sure if we didn't plan this one out, but I'm not sure if you're managing the chat, but if there's any questions.
I haven't seen any questions, but I had a question. So we've talked a bit about insurance and long-term care and alluded to maybe other vehicles out there for taking care of the same type of expense. Is there anything else out there, Chuck, that people can look at besides long-term care to take care of expenses related to long-term, they need help or they need to invest some money in renovation in their home or anything like that?
It's a great question. And actually, when Drew said, did I miss anything? Now's the time, right? Now's the time to look because it's tax time. So if you did your taxes, you have everything right in front of you, right? And you could say, cool, what do I have? What do my insurance policies look like? We just hit on that. But if you're with your tax professional, there's certain deductions you could take for costs during the year. So Mr. and Mrs. Tax Professional, hey, I'm looking at, I know there's a hearing specialist on the call. I'm looking at getting help with my hearing. I have a bunch of things, medical things I want to get done in this year. Does it make sense for me to do them all in one year? Because I might hit the tax deduction. As we age or just through a normal career, especially through a pandemic, your income might be changing. So things might be deductible if you pay for them out of your own savings. There might be avoidable penalties in your pensions and your 401ks based on that need and based on the CARES Act, which just happened. So I know it's talking a little bit generally, but when you look at what you have, should you use your savings? Could or should you use your insurance? Do you have HSA savings, which a lot of folks have access to them now? And obviously the retirement plans, you want to make sure these things are in balance. And again, with a long-term view, because it's great to say, hey, I can write this huge check out of my retirement savings, but again, longevity risk, does that put you at risk 30 years from now? Or if your spouse outlives you by 30 years, are you considering your spouse with a lot of these things? So a lot of moving parts, but it's really an awesome time to take inventory and say, there's been a lot of changes. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, I'd say that's awesome. I love that mentality, but then go get some help because there's been policy changes and there's all these different things you can consider in the meanwhile.
Great, thank you.
And I think, Randy, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I wanted to make a comment. I think that what you were all sharing is that it's a good time to think and plan to avoid crises, because when you have to do those things afterwards, or you have to start thinking about them afterwards, you're not going to necessarily anticipate that dad's going to fall in his house. But if you're saying, okay, dad's getting older, he's in his house, if he wants to stay in his house, what do we need to do? And you plan, you plan. And if it's, if people are thinking, a lot of people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s even start to say, I'm going to downsize, I'm going to leave my house. And then they go and buy a condo with multiple levels of stairs. Now that's not good planning. So I think that, if you start to say, okay, what are we anticipating in the future? And you can't anticipate everything. I'm also with a home health care agency. And one of the things that we found is that people will move to an assisted living facility when they're alone and they want to sell their house and they want to move to a place. Maybe their spouse passed away and they're looking for a place to go where they have some social activities. Of course, the pandemic, let's put that aside. And they're doing really nicely there, and then they get ill, and then they're ill. So they're paying for an assisted living facility with extra costs, and then all of a sudden they need a live-in caregiver, and they either don't have space for it, or the costs are astronomical if you have to have 24/7 coverage, And then we've had clients that move out of assisted living facilities into an apartment with a live-in caregiver. So you can't anticipate everything. And sometimes what's right at one phase doesn't always meet the needs of the other phase. So I think planning and anticipating, but you can't anticipate everything.
Yeah, valid point for sure. Thank you for the input. Go ahead, Chuck.
I'll just add to that,
Actually,
because I think Randy's right. You have to plan, which is why I work for elder care attorneys, because that's where the planning takes place. You want to make sure, and I really appreciated everybody on the panel's points, because they really were, things that we all live and practice in our own professions here. And so I'm just going to make a request to everyone, put their information in the chat for me, or somebody send out an email afterwards with everybody's contacts so that I can reach out and we can work together to make sure. Thank you.
So it's interesting that we've talked a lot about planning, but let me just light the bomb. Okay, we'll do it real quick. Everyone is going to be in a situation where you've planned and that bomb goes off and there's a fall, or there's an event and there's a tragedy, and now all of a sudden life is different. All right. So here's the neat thing. You guys have been on this call with us for a while, and you've got a bunch of professionals here that know. And so I'll give you just a quick rundown. I've been in these scenarios and I've managed cases in real extreme times for people. And a lot of the time, people don't realize that they do have payer sources. You might have a life insurance policy that has a living benefit, and now you're in crisis and you can tap that. Maybe you own a home and you can do a reverse mortgage to take care of care. There is a lot of different things. It's not just long-term care insurance. Perhaps your loved one was a veteran, and you know what? Veterans benefits do actually, they have aid and attendance, and it covers home care. And I mean, it's going to cover something, all these little things, so I think that one thing to walk away from this with is not to ever think that take everything at face value. There's definitely a tremendous value in picking up the phone and calling one of us if you have an acute situation with a loved one, because in 5 minutes, we can talk to you and kind of assess where you are in time and space, what kind of vehicles you have, and what potential payer sources you have. That is an invaluable phone call, because it could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, not just a little bit.
Great. Anybody else? Nina, I'll kick it back to you then to wrap us up.
All right. Well, first I want to thank our presenters and our sponsors today. Chuck Rose, Chad Blecker, Drew, and Erika Carbone. Thank you all today. This was a great discussion. We will be sharing the contact information for the people that were here today, for the attendees, and the recording to the video. So everyone will get that, and you are free to use that link to our YouTube channel to share with other people. So, because this is super valuable information, I really appreciate everyone sharing that today. I think that's it. The chamber is here for businesses to help them grow, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about how we do that. And again, our next event is coming up next Thursday at 4:30, and we look forward to seeing everybody there. Everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a great day, guys.